When actress Margaret Sullivan passed away, her daughter finally revealed the truth behind one of Hollywood's most whispered about love triangles, between her mother, Jimmy Stewart, and Henry Fonda. And the real story? It was far more scandalous than anyone imagined. Though he would go on to become one of the most iconic stars in film history, James Stewart's early years gave little hint of greatness. As a boy, Jimmy was shy and introverted, often retreating into his imagination and his dream of flying planes. While other kids played outside, he was in his basement building model aircraft. He wasn't a standout student, his grades were average at best, and teachers noticed his mind was always elsewhere. But he had one hidden gift. One day at his father's hardware store, a customer short on cash traded an accordion for goods. The local barber ended up teaching young Jimmy how to play it, and from that moment, music became a lifelong love. Still, Jimmy's future looked uncertain. He dreamed of aviation, but his father had other plans: Princeton University, then a life running the family business. Being the dutiful son, Stewart entered Princeton in the year 1928 and even earned a scholarship for graduate studies. But just as his future seemed decided, he made a radical choice. He walked away from academia and joined a theater troupe. It was here that fate stepped in. He met two people who would change his life forever: Henry Fonda and Margaret Sullivan. The trio became inseparable. What Stewart didn't know was that he was walking straight into one of Hollywood's most emotional entanglements. He and Fonda were best friends, but Stewart quietly fell for Sullivan. Eventually, he mustered the courage to ask her out. Years later, she described the moment fondly, calling it the slowest, shyest, and most heartfelt proposal she had ever received. But timing is everything, and sadly, theirs never aligned. Sullivan turned him down. Not long after, she married his best friend, Henry Fonda, in the year 1931. Yet, even as Mrs. Fonda, Sullivan never stopped believing in Stewart's potential. She was convinced he was destined to become a major star. By 1936, Jimmy Stewart had signed with MGM, but his early film roles were forgettable. Meanwhile, Sullivan had become a celebrated leading lady at Universal Pictures, and she wasn't about to leave Stewart behind. When she read the script for Next Time We Love, she insisted Jimmy was perfect for the male lead, even though Universal executives didn't know who he was. Thanks to her persistence, he got a screen test and won the role. At the time, Stewart was still green. He was overwhelmed on set, visibly nervous, and even the director, Edward H. Griffith, began poking fun at his awkwardness. But Sullivan believed in him. Night after night, she coached him in private, helping him refine his performance. The hard work paid off, so much so that MGM hardly recognized the confident actor who returned to their studio. But his personal life remained complicated. That same year, Sullivan remarried, again, not to Jimmy. Still, eyebrows were raised when Stewart moved into a house just around the corner from hers. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe not. Though he carried a torch for Sullivan for years, it was Henry Fonda, ironically, who introduced Stewart to his first Hollywood romance. In 1935, Stewart began a brief but electric affair with legendary dancer Ginger Rogers. Their chemistry would later light up the screen in Vivacious Lady 1938. Behind the scenes, their relationship was far more passionate and personal. It was Rogers, in fact, who took Stewart's virginity. He was 30 years old. Despite the sparks with Rogers, fate, and Hollywood pulled him back into Sullivan's orbit. In 1938, they reunited on screen for The Shopworn Angel. Once again, they delivered magic. The film's love triangle storyline, which included actor Walter Pidgeon, mirrored real life. Years later, Pidgeon would comment that it was obvious Stewart was deeply in love with Sullivan. But for Stewart, it was a love forever confined to friendship. While he continued to long for her, he kept his options open. During the filming of The Shopworn Angel, he was also romantically involved with another Hollywood powerhouse, Norma Shearer. For 6 weeks, their fling lit up the tabloids. Even as new women entered his life, Margaret Sullivan's presence and absence haunted him. Their bond never turned romantic, but it shaped Stewart's career and perhaps his heart more than anyone realized. The love triangle may have been hidden for decades, but it was real and, according to those closest to them, unforgettable. Behind the glitz and glamour of 1930s Hollywood, Loretta Young seemed almost saintly. With her radiant beauty, gentle demeanor, and deep religious devotion, she wasn't just playing the good girl on screen, she truly lived by those values. But even the most virtuous heart doesn't always obey reason. When James Stewart came into her life, young, magnetic, and riding high on his rising stardom, Loretta, like many before her, fell deeply and completely. Sadly, with each meeting, it became more painfully clear, he did not love her back. Stewart lived as if tomorrow might never come. The bachelor life in Hollywood offered him everything: late nights, champagne, endless parties, freedom. One of his next flames was Marlene Dietrich, enigmatic and seductive, the very embodiment of cinematic mystery. They began a passionate affair during the filming of Destry Rides Again in 1939. Their connection was fire and electricity, until the moment Dietrich whispered, "I'm pregnant." Suddenly, Stewart was no longer the hero she had imagined. He grew cold, demanded an abortion, and Marlene complied. But something in her broke. When the film wrapped, he vanished from her life, leaving only a scar where once there had been infatuation. Years later, when Dietrich wrote her memoirs, she reduced Stewart to barely a footnote, dry, dismissive, as though erasing him from her story entirely. For her, he became nothing more than a passing shadow. Quietly, James Stewart earned himself a new title, Heartbreaker. And yet, while love slipped through his fingers, his career only soared. The year 1940 was a turning point. He reunited with his close friend and first screen muse, Margaret Sullivan, in The Shop Around the Corner, and soon after starred alongside Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn in The Philadelphia Story. The film was a triumph. Critics praised Stewart's comic timing, audiences adored his charm. He seemed to shine effortlessly. But behind the scenes, he was plagued by doubt. There was a moment in the film when his character reads poetry, and James Stewart, beloved by America, was paralyzed with fear. It was then that actor and playwright Noel Coward quietly offered words of encouragement. That quiet support made all the difference. Stewart overcame his nerves and delivered a performance so powerful, it earned him an Academy Award. When he stood on that Oscar stage, holding the statue for The Philadelphia Story, the joy felt strangely hollow. He couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't truly earned it. The year before, he had lost the award for Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and this win felt more like compensation than recognition. But there wasn't much time to dwell. War was coming. As Europe burned in the early days of the Second World War, Stewart made one final attempt to build a personal life. He proposed to Olivia de Havilland, a brilliant actress, intelligent and strong-willed. She turned him down. She sensed the truth: he wasn't ready. Her heart, meanwhile, turned toward another, director John Huston, with whom she began a brief, intense romance. Olivia walked away, and Stewart was alone once again. But something far greater than heartbreak was on the horizon. Raised in a home where patriotism meant action, not words, Stewart didn't wait for the storm to reach American shores. While others watched from a distance, he stepped forward. Among all the stars of Hollywood, he was the first to enlist in the military, not for publicity, not for image, but because he believed it was the right thing to do. He went to war not as an actor seeking a role, but as a man answering a call, from the same heart that had once been broken, but still knew how to love his country. And so began a new chapter in the life of James Stewart, celebrated actor, cherished by millions, and above all, a man who understood fear, doubt, love, and honor. In the early 1940s, Jimmy Stewart was one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood. Tall, charming, with a gentle awkwardness that only made him more endearing. But when World War II erupted, not even his star status could shield him from the pull of duty. He didn't just want to serve, he dreamed of flying. There was just one problem: his lanky frame. He was underweight and rejected by the draft. But like one of his own screen characters, Stewart didn't give up. Determined to prove he was ready, he gained weight until, finally, in February of 1941, he passed the physical. Hollywood was behind him now. Stewart, like thousands of others, marched into the unknown. He didn't ask for an honorary post, he wanted to be in the thick of it. His passion for aviation became his gateway to the front. And astonishingly, over the course of 4 years, he rose from private to full colonel, flew combat missions over Germany, and earned multiple decorations for bravery. Yet even amid the roar of war, he remained deeply human. At the Hollywood Canteen, a club for servicemen, he met singer Dinah Shore. Their romance was fast and flickering, like a reel of silent film: walks, songs, a chapel in Las Vegas. And then, cold feet. At the altar, Stewart backed away. Compared to the horrors he'd seen in battle, a broken heart felt like a paper cut.
He rarely spoke about his time in the war. The memories were too dark. Biographers say he hardly ate, lost sleep, and seemed to wither before their eyes. 20 bombing missions drained him, not just physically, but spiritually. And then came the day he likely never forgot, when his squadron flew out without him and was ambushed. 130 men, his comrades, his friends, his airborne brothers, were lost in a single strike. Stewart survived, but a part of him remained up there, in the sky. When he returned home, his family barely recognized him. His gaze had hardened, his face aged, his body thinned. Worst of all, Hollywood seemed to have moved on. He considered leaving acting behind and returning to the family business. Everything might have turned out differently if not for one man, Frank Capra. The legendary director offered Stewart the lead role in It's a Wonderful Life, a film about a kind, broken man on the brink of suicide. Stewart was horrified. He didn't want to play such a character. When asked what kind of film he did want to make, his answer was short and bitter. "I don't know. Just not this one." But there was no other option. He accepted. On set, he was tense, unsure, restless. And yet, all his pain, all his fury, all his loss, he poured it into the scenes that have since become iconic. The moments that move audiences to tears even today are not just performances, they are pieces of his wounded but unbroken soul. Ironically, the film we now consider a Christmas classic was a flop at the box office. It didn't make its money back. It didn't revive his career. But time is a fair judge. Years later, the film found a new life, and so did Jimmy. He would later admit that, of all the roles he ever played, this one was his favorite. His later career was filled with contradictions. He starred in Hitchcock thrillers like Rear Window and Vertigo. But when Vertigo failed to impress at the box office, Hitchcock blamed Stewart himself, claiming he looked too old. In his next film, the director chose Cary Grant instead, even though Grant was actually 4 years older. Hollywood once again showed no gratitude. And yet, while his professional path was full of bumps, his personal life finally found peace. The legendary bachelor, the heartbreaker, the romantic, met someone who changed everything. It happened near Christmas in 1947, as if life was offering him a quiet gift. Her name was Gloria Hattrick McLean. But that is another story. In Hollywood, a place where the spotlight often blinds more than it reveals, James Stewart lived a life marked not just by stardom, but by quiet courage, deep love, and heartbreaking loss. Behind the poised charm of a classic leading man was a sensitive soul yearning for simple happiness, far from the glitter and illusion of fame. His journey to lasting love began with a misstep. At a glamorous party, Stewart had one drink too many and left a less than stellar impression on Gloria Hattrick, a woman whose opinion would soon mean the world to him. He might have lost his chance forever, if not for a twist of fate. Days later, at a dinner hosted by his friend, actor Gary Cooper, Gloria was also present. This time, Stewart was sober, shy, and entirely sincere. His awkward smile, quiet vulnerability, and genuine attention melted the ice. Something shifted. From that night on, their story began. They married in 1949. From then, the carefree bachelor with a reputation for flings became a different man. Life settled into something solid. A home, a family, a deep and abiding love. Gloria brought 2 adopted sons into their marriage, and 2 years later, the couple welcomed twin daughters, whom Stewart adored. His children remembered him as a gentle and devoted father. But even the brightest chapters in a life are rarely free of shadows. A decorated World War II veteran, Stewart held a strong sense of duty and hoped his sons would share it. One of them, Ronald, followed his path into the military. He was killed in Vietnam in 1969. The grief nearly broke Stewart. Where once there had been pride, now there was only silence and sorrow. Yet this wasn't his first wound. Nearly a decade earlier, he had lost someone who had occupied a sacred space in his heart, Margaret Sullivan. Their bond was shrouded in secrecy, tenderness, and an ever-present sense of impossibility. Sullivan had once been married to Stewart's best friend, Henry Fonda, but that hadn't stopped a brief, passionate romance from blossoming between her and Stewart. For a year, they were lovers. Then life pulled them apart. Sullivan struggled with hearing loss and emotional turmoil. In 1960, she died from an overdose. Gloria would later admit that Margaret's death deeply affected her husband. He never fully recovered. Years later, Stewart suffered another, final blow. In 1994, Gloria passed away. She had been his anchor, his refuge, his home. Without her, he seemed adrift. Though he lived for another 3 years, those final days were filled with stillness, solitude, and a quiet descent into farewell. His heart, already heavy, could carry no more. When James Stewart died, the nation mourned. It was not just the passing of a Hollywood legend. It was a goodbye to a true gentleman and patriot. President Bill Clinton called him a national treasure, and no words could have been more fitting. The life of Jimmy Stewart was not merely a wonderful life. It was a testament to how the greatest dramas don't always play out on screen, but quietly, in the chambers of the human heart.